Welcome to the Black Man's Perspective featuring Omar Tyree. I'm Gary Johnson. And tonight, Omar, we're going to be talking about controversy. I'm sure that's something that both of us are familiar with in our careers. But let me start off by asking you, how are you doing today,
Doing
brother?
good, man. The weather's warming up, so it's about to start, getting into our warmer clothes. The sun is coming out. Now the grass gonna start growing, so now you got to get the grass man to cut the grass, every 2 weeks and whatnot. Then you got the weeds in there. Now you got to get the lawn man to come out and get rid of the weeds. So, but it's nice weather, and then we about to get the extra sun hours, so that's gonna happen pretty soon when we get that extra hour of sunlight. So, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, then you got pollen. People got to deal with the pollen
Allergies.
and allergies.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, man, what constitutes a controversy?
Well, I think it's the stuff that we don't want to talk about, the uncomfortable topics and then uncomfortable statements on those topics. Like if I was to say as a black man that I'm rooting for Donald Trump and I don't care what black people have to say about it, then that would be controversy because that's opposite most black people. And it's like, well, why are you rooting for Donald Trump, or rooting for him? And then like, well, I got money already. I'm on the Republican side. Is okay. So he's a black man that's counting his dollars, don't care about the rest of us. That would be controversial because it's going against the grain or grain of most black people. So whenever you go on a uncharted path that's uncomfortable with other people and you're pushing it hard, you're going to start that controversy.
Man, I'm laughing because I just saw a video yesterday of boxer Floyd Mayweather Jr.
Yep.
And he said Donald Trump was the best president we've ever had.
That's controversy.
That's that's controversy, man.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, where's he coming from? He's from Mars.
Yeah.
But this is America, and they put him back in, so that's controversy. How does social media amplify controversy?
Well, they jump on the bandwagon. You got all these followers. So now, if he said that 20 years ago and you don't have social media, so what? We can make comments, but nobody going to hear it. But now with social media, you got 100,000 people commenting. Now you can read all that comments. Now they do a podcast on a podcast. So now other people do podcasts about the comment. Everybody got a podcast. Everybody got an opinion. So it now amplifies everything that's controversial. Where before it just be people talking on the street. Now people can do their own videos and their own social media and their own, clips. And then now they amplify everything. And so, yeah, that's how social media has now amplified all the controversy to make it even bigger.
Is it easier to engage in all this beef, man, and all this versus because of social media? Because you can kind of hide in your basement, or behind, you don't really have to come out so much. Although, then again, when you're on social media, everybody sees you because it's all about clicks and likes. But do you think it's easier now to get into these controversial beefs?
Of course it is. All you got to do is jump on your phone and put a comment in there, and say, like, Floyd Mayweather, you crazy. I never liked your boxing anyway. You get right back on there and you just stirred it all up, which, again, we couldn't do that 20 years ago. Floyd
Right.
may say something, we can't get to him. He's way out there in Vegas. You can't get to him. You talking in D.C. and Florida. I'm talking in Charlotte and Philly. So you can't get, but now you can get right to him, and whoever's answer his social media can read all the stuff that gets to him. So definitely, man, you can stir it all up, jump right in it, or stay out of it if you want to. You got to do is stay off your phone, stay off your computer.
You're a public figure. You're New York Times best-selling author. You make personal appearances, book signings. You travel all over. Uh, I don't see you even before you may not even remember, but I first met you in 2008 at the CBC Book Fair.
Okay.
Uh, but I don't see you, and I've known of you. I never considered you a controversial figure. On
No.
the outside, are you seen as a controversial figure, or are you just a regular guy from Philly?
Yeah, I'm a regular guy from Philly. However, I am a truth sayer. So, depending on what audience you're in, The truth telling can get you in trouble too. So I got in trouble recently with, black women because I'm a black man from the old school where I had some comments to say about, some of the new dating things that are going on, some of the new ideas and some of the new habits of young women. And they didn't like that, So sometimes you can be older and you say things that they feel are dated and it can become controversial. But I don't look at it that way. Most of the guys are like, yeah, Omar, what you're saying is right on point, man. But them young people just don't go that way. So sometimes when you tell the truth, that can be looked at as controversial too. But it's a smaller battle than, when you're against everybody. But yeah, sometimes when you tell something that other people don't want to agree with, it can be controversial as well. But I don't look at myself that way. But as a writer, yeah, when you got to write what you got to write, you got to write what you got to write. You know what I mean? So sometimes people going to disagree with what you got to say, but if you sound on your research and you're not going to back down from it, then you can be in one of those situations where you got to explain things. So I'm not adverse to explaining things when I have to.
Now, you say you're not averse to explaining things. Is that different from, that's not damage control, is it? That's just explaining things and just clarifying, right?
Yeah, damage control is when you did it and you know you was wrong. When you say something, like maybe you said it the wrong way, you said it too hard or said it too loud. You explain it, but damage control, it can go both ways. If you damage somebody because of how you said it, but yeah, for the most part, explaining. This is what people say now. You don't want to come up with excuses, and that's confusing for me because when people call it excuses, if you're explaining it, is that an excuse? Like everybody got an explanation as to why they did something. And with me being a book writer, all books are explaining the phenomenon of the characters in that book. So when people say, "Oh, don't make excuses," I don't understand that word excuse. If you sneeze and you say it's cold in here, was that an excuse? It's cold, so you sneeze. I don't get that. If you driving and you crash into somebody and you say, "Man, I was on my phone," that's not an excuse. That's the reason why you crashed. You shouldn't have been on your phone, but it's not an excuse. It's the reason why. So I'm kind of confused when people use that term excuses versus explanations because I don't look at it as an excuse if you telling me why something went wrong or why you didn't do something. I do my homework because I forgot about it. Okay, you can call that an excuse, but that's the reason why you didn't do your homework. You forgot about it. And so that's the thing I'm a little conflicted with. What's the difference between an excuse and an explanation?
You just clarify if you felt like you made a mistake or an error,
Yeah.
and you just go out and just, honestly just talk about and just clarify it, but you're not trying to clean up anything because you're standing by the truth, right?
Well, for the most part, I'm to the age now, we older guys. So I'm not going to be saying too many things that, you know what I mean, that I didn't think about. I'm not like 20 years old right now. So most of the things that I say, I'm going to be close. Now, if I say it a little harder or I make a little mistake, but I'm not going to say too many things at this age, at this point in my life that are going to be totally off. So I'm not going to be, going all out of my way to apologize on something. So yeah, when we get older, we mean what we say. You know what I mean? You get to the point where I'm not going to be saying things that are way off. So I might say, well, I apologize for bringing that up in the wrong venue. I apologize for stating it so strongly. I apologize for not validating all the facts in it, but I'm not going to be totally off. So no, I'm going to be not going to be apologizing like that. I'm going to be clarifying the point, and that's typically what mature people and professional people do.
How much criticism do you get as an author?
I don't get a lot of criticism. First of all, a lot of people don't read enough. So you got to read to get criticism, right? So if we had everybody reading, so I think you would get more criticism on an article than you're going to get on a book because
Okay.
the book you got more reading to do, you got more time to break it down and get it right. But on an article, if you say, Omar, tell me this in 500 words, and now I got to leave some of the facts out, and then somebody like, well, this in here, then I'm like, yeah, I only have 500 words. If I had 1,500 words, I would explain it a little bit better. So I think I would get more in trouble in an article than I am in a book.
That's a good point. I just had to finish an article today, and the magazine publisher wanted me to not to exceed 350 words. And I was writing on Black fatherhood.
Wow.
And man, but I'm like, what can I say in 350 words? I'm just getting started on Black fatherhood.
I'm proud to be a black father, and I support all the black fathers out there. Go black fathers.
That's it, summary.
Yeah,
So I'm gonna have to break up my article into like part three, into different parts.
yeah.
Can you think of anybody in media that has been, quote, in your view, controversial, but they continue to thrive?
I forget this young black woman's name, but she's always on the opposite side of everything. She's like a medium brown sister, very well spoken. But I don't know her name because I'm not like the guy that studies all the social media people. But I come up with another guy, Shannon Sharp, who's the football player. He
Yeah.
has this Shay Shay Club,
Club
and
Shay Shay.
all he really does is interview people for 2 hours, but he has people on there that are not afraid to say what they got to say, and he'll let them go ahead and talk. And if you got 2 hours, most likely he gonna get you to say something. You know what I mean? But he's not really controversial. But you know what I mean? Like some of the things that people can say on there, but they've gotten used to him now. They've gotten
Yeah.
used to him now. But yeah, like for the most part, it's not that many because now you get used to everybody getting out their way saying what they say. So now you got to go overboard to really be controversial now because we're hearing a whole lot of stuff on social media where we get desensitized, as they say, from a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah, we're kind of numb to it, and especially
Yeah,
with all the stuff going on in Washington with the politics. After a while, man, you just get numb, you
yeah,
know.
yep.
But so, what do you have going on that's coming out?
Well, I got these books coming back. I got famous with the women with a book called Fly Girl, which
Yep.
is crazy because that was controversial. And when I started it, I was talking about gold diggers. Women that get guys to spend a whole bunch of money so they can be fly, so they can be fabulous, so they can stand out. And the women loved it so much they forgot about the gold digging part. So now this woman's a hero. And I'm like, yeah, but when I first wrote her, she was a gold digger, very aggressive, very assertive. Go buy me this, go do this. You're not getting nothing unless you do this for me and do that for me. So she was very transactional. But
Right.
women loved her now. They love her. So I'm like, now I got to bring her back out. And I'm like, you don't want to remind them, but it's like, do you guys remember that this was a gold digging character? Did y'all forget this? And so now I'm bringing it back. And the second book was called For the Love of Money. When she grew up and went to college and graduated, now but she's a professional individual. She's a poet, and she goes out to LA and makes money. Then she becomes the boss lady. And I got in trouble with that because I told women when you start calling yourself the boss, you throw men off a little bit because they're trying to figure out how they're going to deal with you if you calling yourself the boss. So those three books are all coming back out. I call it The Phenomenon of Fly Girl. And then I look at the elevation and evolution of the American black woman because with them book series, I took a girl from age 6 all the way up to 37 in 3 books with all of her changes and all that stuff. And by the time she gets to the third book as the boss lady, she's still unmarried with no children. And that happens to a whole lot of boss ladies because they don't want to bow down to men, so to speak. In fact, when I wrote the book in 2004, it came out in 2005, Oprah Winfrey was like the only boss lady at that time. Now every woman's calling herself a boss lady. But watch this. Last time I checked, Oprah Winfrey was unmarried with no children as a boss lady. And so that happens a lot of times because they don't want to be in a marriage. They don't want a man telling them what to do. They don't want to be under a man's umbrella, the whole nine. So if we get too many women wanting to be boss ladies, we're in trouble as families. We're in trouble as men because they don't typically like doing that traditional woman thing.
Have you ever hosted? And I'm asking because I don't know. Have you ever hosted or had any retreats or forums with women who are fans of your book to talk about some of the controversies?
Well, yeah, right after the Super Bowl, we had a podcast I got in trouble with, and so now that's why I made a whole relationship forum out of my tour coming up. So now I'm gonna be talking about relationships May, June, July, August, September, and I
Okay.
wasn't even set up to do that initially, but that's where it came on to because those 3 books represent 3 zones of the black woman that are very in your face, and you can't get rid of it. In the first stage, they just dating any guy from around the way who has game, as we used to say as young guys coming up. When you see that, you heard game, man.
Yep.
And game typically meant you got to find the right lie to tell the girl to get her to do what you want. And then when you go to college, now they start looking at your degree, where you're going to, get out of school, where you're going to live, how much money you're going to make. And then if they get to 30 without kids and marriage, it gets harder and harder for two reasons. Number one, it's harder to find the men now because a lot of them dudes are already married and already strapped up. And then the second thing, women become a lot more judicious about who they want to be with. You got to have this, you got to have that. You can't do this, you can't. So they have more rules and regulations by the time they get 30. And the guys are like, wow, she got 10 things on her fingers that I got 4 of them things I ain't going to pass. So now nobody qualifies for her when you get 30 and you still trying to. So it gets harder, man. It gets very hard for women the older you get to find guys that qualify for all the things that you want in a relationship. So I got all 3 of them books, and we're going to be talking about them. And yeah, but the podcast thing, I'm going to be on a lot more podcasts with women, but I'm going to keep my cool. I got a little out. If the Eagles won a Super Bowl and I got a little bit loud, a little bit crazy with that masculinity, now I got to get back in professionalism. And we're going to talk about it, all 3 stages of the woman, not just the black woman, but all women go through those 3 stages.
Okay. So the fact that you may have been in a little controversy, that doesn't really scare you off. You're just going to continue to speak the truth.
Yeah, because the books are already here and we're dealing with these issues. A whole lot of women are saying that, I deserve better, I want more. A whole lot of us want more and want better. You know what I mean? Like everybody doesn't get it. So how are you going to get that? How are we going to have conversations so we both can get what we need and what we want? And that's what I want to have conversations on, so I can understand what the women want now, and then let them know that you're going to have to talk to that man about that so y'all can negotiate and work it out, because you can't dictate terms to men just because you want X, Y, and Z. You got to talk to that brother just like he has to talk to you. So I want to get the conversations wide open between men and women, and have them not thinking that they can just bully a guy, or a guy thinking he can bully a woman. We got to get more conversations going. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about in May, June, July, August, and we're going to keep it rolling. Because if I get the colleges invite me in September and October and November, I'll be doing the same thing with the colleges, because that's the new ground of the young women that's going to have to deal with young men, the college students.
When you as I listen to you, one of the things during those critical dialogues that you're talking about, both sides have to communicate in a way that's hearable to the other person.
Yeah,
because
so
you can say something
son,
one way, man, but if it's not hearable, you're gonna be in a whole heap of trouble.
Yeah, my son told me you got to keep your volume in check, Dad, because as soon as you get too loud, you lose. So that's the new thing with social media and podcasts. If they can get you out of your professional speech, get you out of your professional cool, then they can, even though you're still saying the right thing, like you just said, it falls on deaf ears. They're just looking at your body language and your volume. And so I got to be very aware of that with all the, new interviews and all the, forums that I'm on, from this point forward. Because that's what they look for. They're trying to get you out of yourself, try to get you yelling and screaming. And so you got to be professional at all times.
Well, if they get you yelling and screaming, then they can say, "Look at him. He's a madman. He Ike Turner. Look at him.
Yeah. So you got to be very aware of keeping your cool. But they used to do that to black people all the time. They get us on them white shows back in the day. They get a Martin Luther King or Malcolm X or Muhammad Ali. I've seen Muhammad Ali on plenty of shows where they were trying to get him, but he was just so smooth and so ready. Especially after he joined the Nation of Islam, man, he was just ready for him all the time. I was just looking at a interview last night when Muhammad Ali was breaking it down. You are our enemy. You the worst man in the world. We come home, you don't let us do this, and he breaking it down, and there's no way that a white man can argue with points that he's making. Well, you the one locking us in jail. You the one telling us we can't get an education. You the one taking our jobs away. Not the big Kong. Why am I going over there fighting them? They ain't my enemy. You my enemy right here.
Yeah, he had a famous line.
Yeah,
he had a
man.
famous line that ain't no Viet Cong ever called me nigga. So He was very disciplined after he joined the nation.
Man, he was on point, but they were always trying to get him to get out of to say something crazy. And he was right on point, man. So yeah, they've been doing that to us for years. Now we doing it to each other with these podcasts. So I got to watch myself before I wait. Wreck yourself, or you check yourself before you wreck yourself. That's what it
Yeah.
was. Coming up with our hip hop back in the day.
So, generationally, what advice would you give to the generation behind you that's coming up so that maybe they can avoid some of the controversies? Is there anything that you can think of that you would share?
Nah, man, they got stuff that we ain't even dealing with, dude. Like every day they got a new app, you know what I mean? Like they know better than I do, you know what I mean? Because they growing up in it. So they would teach me more than me teaching them. But one thing I'm looking at, the consistency is off, brother. Because if you think about it, they're always getting something new all the time now. If you got something that's new every 3 years, you're changing every 3 years, that doesn't allow you to be consistent at anything. And so they got these kids that are always changing up, even the words that they use. They can't use certain words because people get soft skin. So now, with us, we've been doing the same thing for 30 years. These kids can't say that. They got to keep negotiating new gadgets and new things going on, new phenomenon. So that's the one thing I'm looking at. They can't even get to the point of being consistent because things are changing so rapidly and so much now. So I would try to tell them, be consistent as much as you can, because all these changes and stuff, it's like you're trying to build a house on quicksand. You need solid ground. And with all the changes and stuff that these kids are forced to do now, I don't think that's good for that psyche or that professionalism to have to keep adjusting and adjusting and adjusting and adjusting. It's kind of like when we set up a household, we don't want to move 5 times. I remember with the military people, they would call them army brats. So they would move all apart, and they got new families and new people they meeting, and you never
Yep.
get a chance to really get a solid footing. And that's what's going on with these kids now. It's just too much movement, too much changing all the time, where they can't really get a solid ground on who they are. I don't like that, but it's hard to tell them to be like us because things are changing every day now. So that's something that I'm really aware of. I got to really keep watching to try and figure out how our kids can be more consistent when the world is changing every single day for them.
All right, man. Look, any final thoughts before we wrap up on controversy? Because you're going to join us later on for another show. But any final thoughts on controversy or any shameless plugs? We know you're going to be out there this summer.
Yeah.
So what do you got?
Well, you just got to keep it cool, man. If you want to deal with, how to work through controversy, look up some of them Muhammad Ali interviews, man. They some great, because he was in the middle of it, dude, and he was a celebrated athlete. And if you think about athletes now, he is way better spoken than the athletes. They will not even touch the issues that
No.
Muhammad Ali was dealing with and the poison he dealt with. And so they can learn a lot out of Muhammad Ali. If we talk about controversy, he handled himself very well. And he was a super athlete. I'm talking about giant athlete. And so we got to look at that. Look at Jim Brown, the running back for the Cleveland Browns. Look at Lou Alcindor, who changed his name to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. We got to go back to all them brothers and the big summit that they had
The
because they were
summit. Yes.
very mature brothers. What's the other brother that played basketball all those years for the Celtics? The big center.
Bill Russell.
Bill Russell. You know what I mean? So these
Bobby
dudes,
Mitchell
man,
was there.
oh man, these dudes were
Yeah.
excellent. And so we need to study those guys to learn how to be with the media and learn how to be mature and on point. I got to study them dudes myself before I get into my ram ride in the summer and get ready for it. So yeah, them dudes, I really would study them. That would be my final point. Study the
Okay.
summit and those old brothers that were on point with all the popularity they had and all the controversy that was swirling around them back when they didn't have the kind of money the athletes have now.
Yeah, because they were still working jobs in the off season.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
glad you brought up the summit as our final thought, because at the end of this program, when it airs, I'm going to have a picture of the summit and all those athletes.
Beautiful.
So I appreciate that, man.
Thank you.
All right, Omar, hang with us. We'll see you next week or whenever you come on. We'll talk about a different topic. But thanks for doing that. And the summit is coming up at the end of this show.
Thank you, partner.